Finance Committee to order. We'll note that Alderman Andy Nicholson, Tom Sladek, and myself, Guy Sima, are here, and Tom Duane is sick and excused. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
We'll
Second.
be getting number 7 after number 3. Mr. Duane has asked for,
Move to approve as amended.
okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Approval of the minutes in the Finance Committee
Move
meeting of
approval.
October 15th.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Item number 7 is the request of Alderman Tim Duane to review the Green Bay Housing Authority's tax exempt status and its past history as a whole.
Okay, well, I expected that they would actually be present. However, if I could just review this memo, I believe it was sent. Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks. I believe a memo was sent out to all committee members, is that correct, Nikki?
I had assumed so, but when I was meeting with Tim, he informed me that he did not receive it, so I could bring it extra scribing notes to
Thank
me.
you.
I have it, that's fine.
You do?
I'll take one. Thank you.
I got this.
So I was kind of thrown into this. Robin Howell was missing out, but she's unavailable at the time. So I think the question came up from Mr. Duane about why the Housing Authority does not pay property taxes on any of our properties. So within that packet, as you can see, in lieu of paying property taxes, we pay pilot every year, which is a voluntary payment that we make. And within that packet, it shows you for the last 5 years what we've paid each year. So,
Is that to the city of Green Bay?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. And how, okay, help me out with
How
this.
does that stack up then, I guess, what the
I do not
least
know,
estimated fair market value of those properties is?
I do not know what the value is. They are exempt and we do not assess them. So I do
But
not have.
how is this pilot determined?
It is calculated within your packet, I believe, under the
10% of the rent charge plus
second
utility
addendum.
expenses?
There's a HUD form where payments are put in and it's a computation. Determines that, I don't determine that.
So this is a federal determination then? We have no say-so about it?
As far as I understand, no. But again,
Yeah,
my
you're
understanding
right.
is it's limited on it. I'm not an accountant. so.
Well, Andy, you're more of an expert at that than...
No, she's right. We have no say into it. But what I would like to know, if we are able to set a value or assessed value, Dawn, because these properties are not assessed, correct?
That is correct. We do not assess
So
any exempt properties.
How do we know what the fair market is? And how does the federal government know that?
Well, they do not base it on the assessed value of the property. They base it on the rents that they collect, which is a tangible number.
Okay.
We certainly can, I can send the assessors out for a comparable number as far as assessment is
How
concerned,
do-
but we have not
Okay,
assessed the property.
here's another question. How do we know if we're giving out or we're asking for fair rent? Are we too low, too high? Are we okay?
This is
in the middle?
something that I would assume the
Fair
Green Bay
market
Housing
rents.
Authority addresses and.
Yes, the
So
fair
based
market
on
rents
this
are
form?
determined by the federal government, and we base that off of our county that they determine.
So they basically tell us how much rent we have to charge.
They determine the fair market rent. The rent of these properties is similar to the Brown County Housing Authority, where it's based on 30% of their income and asset situation.
Right.
The only large difference between the two programs is we own and manage the properties themselves versus the vouchers. So very much are they the same in computation of rents.
Right. But with the Brown County Housing Authority, okay, I'm not gonna, okay, with the city, hang on,
So this isn't 10% of the fair market value of the rent, it's the actual rent they pay?
Correct.
And they're paying 30%, so it's 10% of 30% minus utilities. It's pretty low, isn't it?
We're paying 30% of their income, right?
Yes.
Right. Excuse me.
So
You're right.
that's not necessarily tied
Yeah.
to market rents.
Except for the few that are paying the fair market rent because their income is so high, yeah.
So some of the tenants, that have incomes that are basically exclude them from the program? Or-
When they come onto the program, they're required to be low income or very low income, so then their rent is based on 30%. But as the program is intended to do is to make them self-sufficient and then move off of the program. Some make so much money that based on 30%, it would be above and beyond the fair market, so they cap out at the fair market. Generally speaking, most of those people end up moving off the program and buying their own home, et cetera. But we do have that in there to cap them off.
What percentage of the people on the program, have incomes that are beyond which they would beyond that which would
Unsubsidized.
qualify?
Unsubsidized, I would say less than 5%. Probably much significantly lower than that.
Does the program provide for any way to move them out of the program?
But we're actually working on that right now. We are working on incorporating a policy that requires them after a certain amount of time of maintaining that sustainability, moving them off the
I
program.
see. Great, thank you.
Isn't it determined by their disability? Just, they might have a disability, they might have income.
Mhm.
And of course, having some that pay at a higher income, but they still need the service of the unit, that helps offset the cost of it too.
Yep, and there'll be
So
a
sometimes having a
solution
few
for it.
paying customers isn't the worst thing in the world.
Dawn,
But it should be based on their need. If their income is above a certain level, they should have to have something to qualify, in my opinion, but this is just me talking off the top of my head, so.
Dawn, is there a way we could find out what the total of the dollar amount would be on the property, if we had these properties on a tax roll?
We could send out I would need a listing of all the properties of the Green Bay Housing
I'll
Authority.
pack it for you.
They are a separate legal entity from the city of Green Bay,
Mhm.
and we can certainly have the assessors give us
I
an
mean,
assessed
just
value of this.
round
property.
number, very close. I mean, we don't have to spend a lot of time to get specifics, but something that's close,
Mhm.
so we can compare.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Just go ahead, Tim.
Nikki was asked to do this at the $11, just as we received this paperwork at the
Okay.
$11. Did you receive these papers?
I didn't, this is the first time
I
I
got
saw
an
it.
email,
This
I know I
report was
haven't-
emailed to us on Friday.
Oh, okay.
I did kind of
I
run
probably
through
did
it on
get
the
it.
emails. I hate
Read it.
doing that. I love paper.
I do too.
This was, it started in '89 and '90. How many people actually live in these houses still?
That were from
Yeah,
89 and 90,
from the
I would
start.
say 0% are the same tenants that have been there. I myself have turned over probably 60% of the program within the last 12 months
How many of these people are homeless?
that have entered onto the program.
Yeah,
Off the top of my head, I don't have that number, I can get it for you though.
yeah, because, if you're helping out the homeless shelters, that's a
Yep,
great thing.
and we do provide homeless individuals, our number one preference, they have to be Brown County homeless individuals. We do give them a preference above and beyond everyone else on the waiting list, but I can get you that.
But
number.
Nikki, define Brown County resident.
Mm,
Live here for 3 days.
5 days?
As
Come
long as they
on.
can provide some sort of
Yeah,
documentation,
that's-
and, yep, that's what the
And
policy
when we were
is.
looking at the homeless shelter, it was, when I was on protection welfare as chairman, we were right around 70% of the homeless were from outside of the area and basically outside of the state. 70%. They come here, apply for identification in 3 days, they're Brown County resident.
So then,
And then they're here for all our benefits, because we have good benefits compared to basically anybody else in the union.
yeah.
I'm just stating a
I think
fact.
That's a good point,
Yep.
and that's why I asked the question. I have a question for you, because you're in the tax times. If we're paying federal taxes, isn't this coming right back to us again?
Pardon me?
This is a federal program. We pay the federal taxes, aren't we paying for this ourselves, us? This
Well,
program?
All the federal taxpayers at large are paying for it, or the federal government is borrowing money they don't have to fund it. There's a lot of
They're
that
equal
going
here
on.
in town.
Just trying to give an accurate response, that's all.
Okay, that's good. The reason I brought this up is because I have several older generation constituents that said, why are these houses tax exempt? None of the houses that they mentioned are in here. So now I gotta put another communication in as far as who owns these houses. Neighbor Works?
They are a 501c3 organization, and they are subject to tax exempt status.
So how many houses do we have tax exempt in
lot.
our city?
A lot.
A lot, like,
I can't give
Thousands?
you a number, but I certainly can ask the assessor's office.
okay.
But obviously, Green Bay Housing Authority owns, several, the redevelopment authority owns property. The, whether it be,
Neighborhood Works.
Neighbor Works, thank you. So there's a lot of them, and I certainly can get those numbers for you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll read this over, it's good information.
Well, I'm gonna make a motion to hold until next month, then.
Okay, very
So
good.
we have time, and there'll be, I would say, multiple questions that's gonna come out of this, that we can add to the agenda, keep our chairman busy.
And then like what you do is we don't get us wrong.
So I'm gonna make a motion to hold for next meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to hold this for more information.
Thanks, Sue.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. And we go back to item number 4. Purchasing manager's request. 4A is request approval to award the purchase of Cisco firewall hardware and firepower software to camera connecting point for $48,000.
Move approval.
A second, get it going.
Both our purchasing manager, or excuse me, Mike Ronick is here if you have any questions.
We'll bid.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
They said there were 3 responses.
2 responses and comparative from the state contract.
Is that on here then?
Yeah, it's on the
Page
first
4A.
quote summary.
3, the third column, the one more page. One more page the other way.
Page 4 again.
Right there, that's a state contract comparison.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Item 4B is request approval to award the purchase of 2016 Type 2 ambulance to Everest Emergency Vehicles for $172,912.
Move approval.
That is,
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Under discussion.
that is the correct summary here. We had 5 bidders and we're recommending the low bid.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Item 4C is request approval of the purchase of 2016 fire engine pumper from Pierce Manufacturing for $584,065.
This one is a single bid that we received, and when we did this quote, we reached out to 9 vendors that qualified as single source. That means that they built the apparatus from the ground up, and that is the specification that the fire department has required. So there are 9 qualified bidders. We sent them engraved invitations to bid. We called all 9, and we invited them to come to a pre-bid meeting. We had 3 vendors that attended the pre-bid meeting, Seagrave, Spartan, and Pierce. They were allowed to ask questions. We had an honest, open dialogue regarding the specifications, and the give and take in that regard. Only Pierce followed through with a quote. Pierce has been awarded, I think, our last 4 apparatus. They're a very tough competitor. We reached out to the 2 people that attended the pre-bid meetings. They complained that our spec is written towards Pierce. However, we have language in the spec from Custom Fire. We have language in the spec from Seagrave. So, we tried, when our department, the specification team from the fire department, they try and craft a specification that will best meet their need. We make it clear that we will consider exceptions. So yes, there are Pierce language in these specifications, but it is not restrictive. We'll consider, options. The bidder, one of the bidders that was at the meeting, Seagrave, they bid 2 years ago, and they were $80,000 higher than Pierce. But when we asked them about why they didn't bid this time, they said, well, we didn't like the specification. And in reality, they just weren't competitive. So I believe that we have a fair price here. This price is 8.7% higher than 2 years ago. The industry, and I think Chief Litton can corroborate this, the industry has had annual increases of 5%, so this came in slightly under that. So one of the advantages that Pierce has over competition is they're located in our backyard, and they don't incur some of the expenses of site inspections, travel expenses. We send some of our firemen to the factory to oversee the production of this unit. Obviously, they have an advantage regarding travel costs in that situation. So as a purchasing manager, I'm satisfied with this Pierce bid. I'm disappointed that the other vendors chose not to bid, but we can't control that. And I firmly believe that if we were to rebid this, that we have the same result.
Well, you delved into this area I was interested in. And you were forthright in saying that, well, at least a couple of the other people that attended basically had complaints that the specs were geared toward the Pierce company, at least that's their allegation. And you defended it, saying that there were some from others also. But evidently the majority of it was for Pierce. That was at least their allegation. And you think because they're in our backyard, that's the reason it's not competitive, because we're close to them for inspections, etc. But I really have to go back to my early experiences. This is not a new subject, folks. It's and early on in my career, they made a large attempt at in this city of trying to expand the number of people who could bid on goods and services to the city of Green Bay. And they formed, and it all comes down to the specifications. The specifications subcommittee is what was formed at the time and was in existence for at least half a dozen years or so. And then new administration came in and out the door it went. And that specification subcommittee was made up of a couple of people from the private sector, a couple of older persons, and a couple of people from, important people from our staff, people that deal with the heavy equipment, etc. That's what we were looking at. And of course, it was our goal at that committee was to provide a spec that did meet the needs of our department, but at the same time didn't have a spec so restrictive that no one was willing to compete with it. And I tell you, there was bid rigging thing, conflicts in the city of Green Bay with road construction. There was a big mess about it at the time. And I think that committee should have never been disbanded myself. Because I think there was a real attempt to get input and have people from the community, people from the staff, people from political representation to try to find what would really be a fair specification. Because I suppose maybe the other companies got it rigged in other areas. I don't know. I don't know, I use this rig word pejoratively, maybe unfairly. But that's the intimation. And the fact that 9 of these qualified people, 2/3 of them didn't even bother to show up for a very heavy-duty item, something that's over $500,000, maybe tells me something that maybe our spec isn't what it should be. And so how do we come and resolve that? I don't know. Rome wasn't built in a day or anything, but, you know, it's always concerning when you just have a single bidder, and then one of the complaints of the few people that participated were that they felt it was aimed at the Pierce manufacturing, and we've had confirmation that a good portion of it was. And I don't know, how do we go about making our specifications? I mean, you don't just ask the vendors, you know, certainly they're there to participate. But, you know, that specification subcommittee was something that really opened up the discussion. And for a while, we had a lot more bidders in the city of Green Bay. But then, and I tell you, the eye was on the purchasing manager. And I have to say, I think you've done a fine job. I don't find quarrel with you. I think you're more forthright than some of your predecessors, and some of them were pretty sneaky as far as I was concerned. They're very highly respected, but Mr. Hodak got rid of the specification subcommittee, and it was back to recommendation.
Question guy.
So I don't know, I know I'm just kind of retorting history, and I'll get right to you, but I guess for the future, I'd like us to consider, maybe I should bring in a communication or something.
I would think that'd be the best thing to do, Mr. Chairman.
That we should consider doing that, especially for heavy equipment and stuff, because I tell you, there was a lot of whining and dining of public works people. Certain companies got all the work, got all the bids, and, you know, it isn't that hard to bring a bid.
So did that committee review every spec, or just ones over a certain dollar amount, or how did they determine if it was a committee convened?
You know, I was on the committee for a while,
Mhm.
and it was in my earlier days, so I was a neophyte, but as you know, I'm a clever devil, I catch on quick. But I think it was basically well, we were looking at supplies even, and there's different ways to make things go a certain way. And sometimes it was just, we went away from reviewing specs to the purchasing manager, and then it was always, well, we think he's a fine person and all this, and, you know, there was always suddenly, well, if you had a question about something, it was you'd be like you're attacking the integrity of the person who was in charge. And I just felt we just went away from the idea of trying to get more people interested in being vendors to the city of Green Bay.
Well, as you know from discussions we had a couple of years ago about specifications and a bidding of a radio project that the county was doing, this sort of stuff troubles me. And I don't like seeing a single bidder. So if you want to have some discussion about bringing back a committee that assures that our specifications are done right, I'd be very open to that idea.
Well, you know, nothing's perfect, but I felt it was, you know, it's a little harder to persuade 6 people on a committee than it is to, influence one director.
Well, this is not, I'm not the final authority on specifications.
There's
The
staff.
fire department has, no, the fire department creates a specification to meet their needs. Now, me and my staff sit down with that department several times through the process. It takes 2 months to boil this down. This is a 90-page bid document, over 300 line items. Now, I'm certainly not an expert on heavy equipment, but we do try to, challenge the department and try to make it as fair of a specification as possible. With the example I gave you earlier of Seagrave, that did choose to bid 2 years ago, but was $80,000 high. We did not find them non-responsive on any of their bid items, so we would have accepted the apparatus they had. They were just too high. So, what was in the spec this year was similar to 2 years ago. We didn't disqualify them for what they took exception with. We accepted their exceptions. But
Rick, can I presume that you would agree, however, that when we're buying $500,000 items, it would be to our advantage to have more than one bidder?
without a doubt,
So I would be interested in
Yeah.
whatever process we might look at to not have single bidders on items this large.
I agree. I don't have a problem with what you're proposing, other than it, will add more time to the process. This is an important piece and an expensive piece of equipment. But you can see on the ambulance that we had 5 bids. I can promise you that we did personally invite all those 9 eligible vendors to bid.
I believe you, I accept that, so
Yeah,
things didn't go the way we would have hoped to.
exactly, yeah.
On this one, so I think it's worthy to sit back and think about, is there something we can change to not arrive at this sort of point again?
Well, I'd certainly like to see it. Go ahead, sure.
Just as a point of reference, and if you want to go out and rebid it again, I certainly have absolutely, you can tell us to do that. I'll tell you that, the manufacturers, the 9 manufacturers are pretty much located throughout the country. Emergency One, or E1, for example, is out of Ocala, Florida. And if you look in the region in southeast of the United States, they get probably 90 to 95% of the bids in that area because they're the regional builder, single source builder. Spartan, for instance, is in Michigan. If you look over in that area, they get the majority of them. Look here in Wisconsin, Pierce is the largest manufacturer, by the way, in the country of fire apparatus. They're right in Appleton. Seagrave happens to be located in Wisconsin as well, in Clinton. So they're not all that far away, 3 hours away. So they have just as much of a competitive advantage, or close to, as the one in Appleton does. And I think that in this bid, because of the way it was written, that Pierce had to take some exceptions because we had added in language from other vendors. There was no reference in there whatsoever to any proprietary, let's just use suspension, for example, a TAC 4 suspension from Pierce. There was no proprietary language that I'm aware of in the spec that would have eliminated any one of them in particular. That's just the way this thing works. There's a manufacturer in Louisiana called Ferrara, and if you look in Louisiana, Mississippi, in those areas, they get 95% of the bids. It's an unfortunate thing, but that's just the way it works. Having said that, if the committee wants to send it back out for bid, we'll do that. I don't think we're going to get any different results.
I'm not proposing that we send it back out, I'm just thinking future. Let's look at what sort of a process adjustments we can make to hopefully get multiple bidders.
I have given my staff specific direction not to make those things proprietary. We end up with all the manufacturer specs, and you pull pieces from it because it meets our needs. And essentially, that's how the thing gets pieced together. But I'm not opposed to having it go to a spec committee. I'm not opposed to any of that. For the future, that's the way it goes. That's
Well, it involved discussions, and sometimes vendors were there, and the arguments were very interesting from my standpoint, from a third-party viewpoint, and, it challenged my brain. but at least I felt it was healthy, and we ended up making decisions.
Some of them build them only in aluminum, some of them build them in stainless steel. Some of them only do that, it's really it's a very complex kind of.
Well, just one more thing, at the pre-bid meeting, when we did have the three vendors, there wasn't one question that was asked that we weren't willing to accept a compromise or make an exception.
A comparable.
Yes. So the two vendors that were there that chose not to bid, they were told, they asked and were answered that the way that they built it would be acceptable. So again, I understand what you're saying, and, but I think we did a thorough job of trying to engage bidders here, and unfortunately, we only had one.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Sladek, seconded by Mr. Nicholson to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Opposed, motion carried. And for D, request approval of the order of a 5-year contract vehicle. Toyota heavy duty. And what is it? Is this just our,
This is city towing.
this is like buses and stuff like that?
This is for police tows, for,
For vehicle tows?
yes, vehicle tows. The inspection department uses this contract for removing abandoned cars from neighborhoods. Our city uses it if we need a piece of heavy-duty equipment moved. So you can see that clearly, and Crosby has had this contract for about 7 or 8 years. They are far and away the low-cost provider, and we're recommending that they maintain the contract for the next 5 years.
Move approval.
Second.
Moving second to approve the heavy duty wrecker as the vehicle towing, heavy duty wrecker service for Green Bay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Number 5, discuss the amount needed from the emergency fund for police and fire commission with the hire of 18 firefighters, 12 police officers, and police chief.
So as you
Human
can,
resources is estimating $23,000.
so as you can see, we have had a pretty active recruitment process for police and firefighters. And HR is asking that we use $23,000 in contingency to cover these extraordinary recruiting efforts that they have put forth in 2015.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve up to $23,000 to cover the cost of hiring 18 firefighters, 12 police officers, and a police chief. I guess that's retroactive, right?
Yes, thank you.
We didn't have any money in our fund when
We budget $20,000, but, you know, obviously we had a significant number of turnovers later in 2014 as far as firefighters, and then we also had the recruitment of the police chief.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Item number 6 is a request by Alderman Wery to begin discussions and take public input on how to utilize approximately $5.4 million being rebated from excess federal tax revenue when state passes the final bill.
This is an item that was on, that I think he brought forward in October. We had it on our last November agenda, so it's just a carryover item. So I don't know if it could be covered perhaps when they have that open discussion on this item that I think is scheduled in the next few weeks. But
Well, there is some kind of public input meeting,
that's what I was thinking.
17th.
but it's not actually going to be before the council, it's just like a little public hearing
Okay.
by itself. I'm just wondering if that should be in collaboration with the council meeting. I think all the council members, at least I for one, would be interested in hearing from people. Chris, because that has improved their coverage of local stuff lately. I know I've personally gotten some emails and letters from all sorts of different people. But I think we should like that public hearing. It has already been set and advertised, or?
I'm not exactly sure, but I certainly can find out that information.
I mean, just
and
who
get back to
does
you.
the choosing of this? This should be the
I-
council. This has been before us, and
Right. I
and
wanna
we've
say-
held it up, but,
I want to say that Alderman Dwayne was working with the mayor. Tom, do you know anything further? Okay.
well, how does the committee feel about having this in conjunction with a special meeting of the council or adding it to our council meeting? It's a pretty big item. There's a
I'm
lot of
okay with it.
There's a lot of discussion in the community about this. And a lot of people have different ideas. And
I agree.
the mayor's kind
I
of
think-
throwing out what he wants to
I
do
think
with
the
it.
council members would be interested in hearing what the people have to say. I mean, I was planning on attending, but if it could be done adjacent to a council meeting, that'd be more efficient.
Do you want it adjacent to, like, before a council meeting, or you want it with the council meeting?
Well, I think
Well,
on the
they're-
I
that's
think
sort
on
of
the
the same thing.
17th, it's proposed to start at 5, right? So,
17th is what day? Is that a Tuesday or?
Today's the 7th, so 14 plus
Thursday.
3 would be Thursday. Week
I'm
from
not sure. I think
Thursday.
it's 5 o'clock on that Thursday.
But I'm just wondering if we should declare it a council, a special council meeting at the same time, so the whole council is there. And that we kind of to ensure that, we hear the whole council doesn't ask questions later or something like that. I think this is a pretty big item for people. Now, I don't know, maybe nobody will already show up, I don't know. But it's hard to predict, but I would think there's a lot of community interest, and it's well publicized. I think we'll probably have some.
Is that something we should work through the council president? Have him work with the mayor's office to- if we're gonna establish that as a special
Why don't we at
meeting?
least put it on the agenda here tonight, on our minutes, that we're recommending that it be in conjunction with a council meeting.
That's fine.
And if, and I think that should be part of it. Now, the time, if you want to keep it the same, move it to a different time, I mean, I'm open to that. Maybe the president of the council can advise us by our next meeting about that. Of course, you're talking about 2 days later, right? I mean, maybe everybody's going to attend. I think I'm free that day. But,
Would that be your motion then, to recommend that,
if we put in the format of a council meeting, a hearing, uniquely
okay,
to hear from the public, a council meeting,
okay.
that it becomes something recorded. Could we have a motion in effect?
Yeah, sounds good. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. It's moved and seconded that we recommend to the council that this be part of a special or regular session of the council. And that it's pretty tight here now again, so I don't know who set up the 17th. It was not done. This item has been on our agenda and of course ignored. People are setting times and all that without consulting this committee, and we held it up in the beginning because we wanted to have some control over this thing and get maximum input.
Well, and the council can't act on this until the third week in January anyway. We don't have another council meeting until January 17th or 18th, so there'd be
15th.
time to move this into January if we wanted to.
But they've set it up for December 17th?
I'm not familiar with the date. Alderman Slotnick mentioned it was going to be on
That's what
December
I thought I
17th
heard
at
at the
5
mayor's
o'clock.
report at the last council meeting, that they were holding on 17th at 5 o'clock. But I haven't seen anything in writing on it, so I'm sure it could easily be adjusted. And
Right.
given when next council meetings are taking place, I don't think it's a time-sensitive matter, so.
Yeah, it really isn't. Maybe we should wait till after the holidays, you know?
We do plan on, I believe we will receive that check before the end of the year, and we do plan on just setting up a separate money market specifically for those funds that will be deposited and until decision is made by the council.
So it's probably gonna grow by $1 or $2.
I was just gonna say, yeah,
Yep,
you,
bank 'em,
that was,
let's see
I'm
what we
hoping a
earn.
little bit more.
Let's see what we earn.
We probably won't earn much. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Report by the finance director.
The only update that I have is we've implemented the changes in our budget document. We're just waiting for the council to take up the final piece, which is our sanitary sewer rates, which will come out next week. GBMSD just recently passed their budget earlier, I think it was earlier last week. So once that is approved, we can start pushing out the final document. We do plan, this year we plan on adding a summary of all the changes that were made by the personnel, the Joint Personnel Finance Committee, and then also by the council. So it's a readily available document for you, so you can just see all the changes. And then also, we spoke of anticipated carryover projects. I plan on having that in the final budget document as well for your reference.
Move to receive and place on file.
Okay, so moved and seconded by Nicholson to receive and place on file for the finance director. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. And could we entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
How did this pen stop working after about 3 days? Oh, no, it's working again. I don't know. Sometimes they get cold.
I need a breath of fresh air.
Can we stop this, guys?
You know,
Yes, please.
when you're outside,